Good evening, everyone. This week's Parshas Vaeira, and we will be starting from the beginning of the Parsha, Perek Vav, Pasuk Beis, chapter 6, verse 2. So we're going to read a number of psukim, and then we'll ask a few questions. Vayidaber Elokim al Moshe, Hashem said to Moshe, Vayimer elav ani Hashem, and he said to him, I am Hashem. Vaeira el Abraham, el Yitzchak, vel Yaakov, bekel Shakai. I appeared to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov using the name Kel Shakai. Ushmi Hashem le'nedati lahem. My name Hashem, I did not be, but through my name Hashem, I did not become known to them. Itam. I also established my covenant with them. L'seis lemes eretz Canaan, to give them the land of Canaan. Eis eretz migorema shegaruba, the land of their sojourning in which they sojourned. V'gam ani shamati es nakas b'nei Yisrael. I have also heard the cries of the children of Israel, that the Egyptians are enslaving them. And I have remembered my covenant. Therefore, say to the Jewish people, I am Hashem. This is the message that Moshe is to deliver to the Jewish people. Ani Hashem, I am God. I shall take you out from under the burdens of Egypt. And I shall save you from their enslavement. I shall redeem you with an outstretched arm, and with great judgments. I shall be for you, I shall take you to me as a nation. I shall be for you as God. You will know that I am Hashem your God, who took you out from under the burdens of Egypt. And I will bring you to the land that I raised my hand, meaning that I swore, so to speak, Hashem says, to give it to Am Yitzchak and Yaakov. And I shall give it to you as an heritage. I am Hashem. That's the message. Moshe spoke so, meaning Moshe spoke these words to the Jewish people, but they didn't listen to Moshe because of shortness of wind and hard work. So Rashi explains when it means they didn't listen to Moshe means they did not accept his words of comfort, and anyone who was in anguish, his breath is short. His breath is short. And therefore, that's what it means. They did not listen to Moshe from shortness of wind, shortness of breath, because they were in anguish due to the hard work that they were going through. Now, let's just skip two psukim, and let's go to Pasuk Yud Gimel. Okay. Vayidaber Hashem Moshe al Aaron, and Hashem spoke to Moshe and to Aaron, Vayitzaveim el bnei Yisrael, and he commanded them regarding the Jewish people, vel Paro melech Mitzrayim, and regarding Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, loitzias bnei Yisrael meretz Mitzrayim, to take the Jewish people out from the land of Egypt. So Rashi in his commentary says, what does it mean that Hashem said to Moshe and to Aaron, and he commanded them regarding the Jewish people? So Rashi comments, he commanded them regarding the Jewish people means, the way it says it here is, right, Sivam Alehem Lahanhigam Menachas Velizbaloisam. Hashem commanded Moshe and Aaron to lead them calmly and to be patient with them. That's what it means at this point, that Hashem commanded Moshe and Aaron regarding the Jewish people. It means regarding the fact that you should lead them calmly and be patient with them. Okay, so now that we've gone all through this, what we have here is that Hashem tells Moshe to deliver a message of freedom to the Jewish people. Now, you'll notice that there are two words that are constantly being mentioned. If you look back at Pasuk Vav, verse 6, it begins, L'chein amar levnei Yisrael, Ani Hashem, I am God. And then when you look at verse 7, where it says, V'lakachti eschem li la'am, I'll take you to me as a nation, I'll be for you as a God. You know that I am Hashem, your God, who took you out from under the burdens of Egypt. Again, this stressing on Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I'm Hashem, your God. And then, again, in Pasuk Ches, verse 8, I shall bring you to the land that I swore to give it to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. I will give it to you as an heritage. Ani Hashem, I am Hashem. Why is there so many times being repeated, Ani Hashem, I am God, in this message? That's one question. And the other question is, skipping again to Pasuk Yud Gimel, verse 13, where we just said that Rashi comments on the words that Hashem said to Moshe and Aaron, and he commanded them regarding the Jewish people. He commanded them that they should lead them calmly and be patient with them. Why was that important to say right now? Did something happen? Or something going to happen? What exactly is the reason now that Hashem is telling Moshe and Aaron to lead the Jewish people calmly and to be patient with them? So I always thought that the reason for this is because basically this is when Moshe and Aaron are starting to lead the Jewish people, right? This is when they're starting. And therefore, Hashem says them, the first thing that Hashem says to Moshe and Aaron about leading the Jewish people is, be calm, be patient. But if you think about it, what exactly, if we're looking at the rest of the story until they leave Egypt, what exactly was their major interaction with the Jewish people that they have to lead them calmly, that they have to be patient? I can't think of something until after they leave Egypt that there's some kind of issue of leading them calmly and being patient. I mean, the basic what's going to be going on is that Moshe and Aaron are going to be speaking to Paro. We're going to go into the 10 plagues. In next week's parsha, Moshe is telling the Jewish people about taking the Korban Pesach. Taking the Korban Pesach, that was a challenge because they were going to be offering the deity, the god of the Egyptians, maybe they wouldn't be so happy about it. So Hashem tells Moshe, be calm, be patient. But he's telling this to him. This is appearing here way before, it's a good amount of time before that even happens. So why is it so important now? For me, happening to Korban Pesach later. So why now at this point is Hashem telling Moshe and Aaron, lead them calmly and be patient?
But be patient, this is only from Rashi.
So
there is no.
I'm asking you on Rashi.
You're asking why?
According to the way Rashi explains it, why was this message being given over now? Why Rashi explains it that way, the commentaries talk about. But the point is, though, that according to Rashi, that this is the message that Hashem is telling Moshe and Aaron. Why now is he telling them this? Okay, so I want to share with you a very interesting approach from the Vaeira Yosef. And the Vaeira Yosef says that there's something else also going on here, and this is also based on Rashi and the other commentaries, or based on Rashi's approach here, and that is, at the end of last week's parsha, Moshe and Aaron go for the first time to Paro to tell them to let the Jewish people go out for 3 days in the desert. Paro says no, and what's his reaction? No more straw, gather the straw yourselves, and you still have to produce the same quota of bricks that you always do.
Make it worse.
Right, which means it made it worse. And then Moshe says to Hashem, why have things become worse? So Rashi brings down a medrash that Hashem rebukes Moshe for questioning him. So he rebukes Moshe for questioning, but Moshe says, why has everything turned so bad? And Hashem rebukes Moshe for saying, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they never questioned me, and you're questioning me. So he rebuked Moshe. But did he answer Moshe?
No.
Moshe said, why did it get worse? Did he answer?
No.
So it would seem like that, right? It would seem like he didn't answer. So the Vaeira Yosef says like this. Moshe was under the impression that, it's time for the Jewish people to leave Egypt. And who has to be convinced? Paro. Paro has to be convinced that they should leave. And Hashem says to Moshe, you know who else needs convincing to leave? The Jewish people need convincing to leave. Now, why would they need convincing? Why do they need to be convinced to leave? What's holding them back? What's so great about being in Egypt that they would want to remain? That there's a need to convince them somehow. So he explains, it's really based on a medrash. But before we get to the medrash, I want to share with you something, a very interesting insight about something that took place in Egypt before Moshe even showed up, according to the way Rashi learns from the Sefer Yechezkel, the book of Ezekiel, which in Perek Chav, chapter 20, Pasuk A, verse 5. And the prophet says, like the prophet Yechezkel, again, it's repeating a message from Hashem. And Hashem relates, V'asa yadi lezera beis Yaakov, I lifted my hand to the children of the house of Jacob, v'yivadu lahem beretz Mitzrayim, and I made myself known to them in the land of Egypt. V'asa yadi lahem leimar, ani Hashem Elokeichem. I lifted my hand to them and I said, I am Hashem your God. Similar to the words here. I am Hashem your God. On that day I swore to take them out from the land of Egypt. El Eretz Asher Tartu Lahem, to the land that I had sought out for them. Zavas Chalav Udvash, flowing with milk and honey. Tzvi L'chal Aratzos, the most beautiful of all lands. Vaeira Aleim, and I said to them, this is Hashem saying, I said to the Jewish people. Who do you say it through?
Medium.
No, he's going back to Egypt now.
Ah.
This is talking about, he says, I told them I swore to them I'm going to take them out of Egypt. That means this is Hashem was sending a message to Jewish people in Egypt. Who did he send it with?
Moshe?
It was before Moshe.
Before Moshe?
This is before Moshe.
Send message to before?
According to the way Rashi learns. Rashi doesn't learn that this is a message from Moshe. It's a message before Moshe.
Joseph?
No. Who else? Who else do you think? Joseph was dead.
No, but before.
No, but okay. But they weren't enslaved yet, right? Well, you're not talking about enslaved.
Before slavery?
Yeah, Joseph died before the slavery. The answer is Aaron. Aaron, Moshe's older brother. Before Moshe came on the scene, Aaron was the prophet of the Jewish people then. He was the leader of the Jewish people. And he was given this message. What was it? Ish shekutze einov hashlichu. Cast away, every one of you, the detestable things that you are drawn to. Ubegelule Mitzrayim malti tamo. Do not defile yourselves with the abominations of Egypt. Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I am Hashem your God. Vayam Rubi, and they rebelled against me. Avu lishmaya Eloi, and they didn't want to listen to me. Ish shekutze einayim lo yishlichu. They didn't throw away those detestable things. Veskuli Mitzrayim lo azvu. They didn't abandon the abominations of Egypt. V'oyma lishpoi chamasi aleim lachalais api b'hem b'seich eretz Mitzrayim. And I was ready to pour out my anger on them and destroy them in the land of Egypt. And I did it for my name, that it should not be desecrated in the eyes of the nations, that they were in their midst. It's unbelievable.
What are you reading?
The book of Yechezkel, the book of Ezekiel, one of the books of Tanakh. He's relating what happened in the past. It's part of a message it's a message to the Jewish people in his times, but he's going back to something that took place in Egypt beforehand. Which means that according to this, there was a time before things started that Hashem sent a message to the Jewish people that basically, I want to take you out, but you got to get rid of you got to stop worshiping idols. We know that unfortunately, because they were slaves to the Egyptians who worshipped idols, they began worshiping idols. You aware of that?
No, but
you've heard of that, right?
Yeah, but there is no any indication he was opened for Aaron.
That's
only from here.
This is where it is. This is something that's happening before anything happened, and before the whole Yetzias Egypt happened. And Rashi has a source that it came through Aaron. It's from a medrash. It's a source. It was Aaron. Okay, Rashi brings out it was Aaron. Now, but the point is that there already was a message, right, being sent to the Jewish people early, right, at an earlier time, that, basically, I want to take you out of Egypt, but to do it, you have to give up your idol worship. And what does it say? They didn't do it. They wouldn't do it. And Hashem was ready to destroy them for it, but he said no. So we see here that there is already a problem the Jewish people faced in Egypt, that Hashem wanted them to stop worshiping their idols, and they wouldn't do it. And this, according to the Ber Yosef, is what Hashem was relating to Moshe, and not to be related to the Jewish people again, which was that it's time to come out from Egypt. Moshe has to know that only is power a problem, the Jewish people are a problem. The Jewish people are not ready to leave Egypt. They don't want to leave Egypt yet. Why? Because if they leave Egypt, they know that they have to give up idol worship. And they weren't ready to do that. It was worth it for them to suffer in Egypt and not to give up idol worship. Now that may sound strange. However, if you just think about the many times the Torah warns us about idol worship, and when you read through Tanakh, you read how many times the Jewish people stumbled into worshiping idols. And then they stopped, and then they went back. And we know that idol worship was one of the causes of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, the first Beis HaMikdash. So idol worship at a point in time was a Yetzer Hara. The same way there's a Yetzer Hara, there's a evil inclination, there's a desire for certain things that are forbidden to us. Idol worship was something that was tempting. It drew a person. People wanted to go towards it. Until the Talmud tells us that the sages daven to Hashem to take away that temptation. We don't have a temptation to worship idols. We don't have a temptation to go to over to a Buddha and bow down to it. We think it's ridiculous. But there was a point of time that we actually were very much tempted to do that. The same way there are things that tempt us now, idol worship was a temptation. The Jewish people, now that they succumbed to the temptation of idol worship as slaves to idol worshipers, became so addicted to idol worship that they really weren't ready to give it up. Even though they were slaves, they were still ready to go through all that and not to give up idol worship. The book of Yechezkel says the Jewish people didn't want to give it up. Hashem said, I'm ready to free you, but you got to give up your idols. They wouldn't do it. Now again, Hashem says to Moshe, this is the issue. And that is why in the message of freedom, Hashem constantly repeats, Ani Hashem, Ani Hashem, Ani Hashem, I am Hashem. You've got to realize that I will take you, I am Hashem, I'll take you out, I'll save you, I'll take you out. But as it says, I'll take you as a nation, and you'll know that I am Hashem, your God, that took you out of Egypt. This is a condition. If you want to be able to get out of Egypt, you've got to accept that Hashem is God. There are no other gods, no other powers around. And this is part of the message that Moshe has to deliver to the Jewish people. This is something that he had to now realize was needed for the Jewish people to come out, and he had to deliver that message to them. Okay, so what happens? Moshe delivers the message, and what is the reaction of the Jewish people? No, they're not listening. Why? Because of the shortness of breath and hard work. The Medrash says on these words that they didn't listen. The Medrash says they didn't listen because they did not want to give up their idol worship. That's what the Medrash says. When it says they didn't listen to Moshe because of hard work, avoda kasha, difficult work, you know what difficult work that means? Really? It means avoda zara. It means the strange worship, the strange work. It was an avoda kasha. It was difficult for them. It was a service. It was a worshiping that was difficult for them to give up. And therefore, that's why they didn't listen to Moshe. And there's another medrash that says it even more, in a more elaborate way. Starts out with an interesting question. The pasuk says the Jewish people didn't listen. So the medrash says, what do you mean? If a slave is told that you're going to be free, he's not going to listen? Not going to listen? Now, we got to back up for a second. This message is coming after the first time, right? Moshe told Paro to let them out, and Paro makes things even worse. So it's not like, if things are so, this message, they heard it already before, and things got worse, which could be a good reason why the next time the message comes, they wouldn't listen. That's what I would have answered what seems to be the question of the Medrash. But the Medrash seems to be bothered, if I understand correctly, by fine. They were disappointed before. They were disappointed. But Moshe is basically telling them it's going to happen. It's a setback, but it's going to happen. Lo yishamu al Moshe, didn't listen, didn't mean anything. Why? Therefore, the Medrash says, "Elashayakasha be'einayim lifresh me'akum." But it was too hard for them to separate from their idol worship. And then the Medrash brings from the book of Yecheskel, which I wonder if, according to the Medrash, maybe this episode of Yecheskel is the same episode here. I'm not going to go so far to say that, but it's definitely using what's said over there. Okay, so therefore, one of the commentaries in Medrash called Eitz Yosef says, when Moshe told them the message about leaving Egypt, did they hear it? Of course they heard it. They heard it, but they didn't want to accept it. They heard it. They paid attention to that message that Hashem is going to take them out, but they didn't want to accept what Moshe said. They didn't want to listen to what Moshe said, that they have to stop worshiping idols because it was too hard. So v'lo shamu el Moshe doesn't mean they didn't hear the message of freedom. They heard the message of freedom, but they wouldn't listen to Moshe to abandon idol worship because it was too hard. And therefore, with all the problems they had in their slavery, they weren't going to give up to idol worship. They'd still deal with it. They'll live with it. They'll live with it. Okay, so now what happens? So again, they didn't listen, and Moshe speaks to Hashem, and Hashem says to Moshe, "You're going to go back to Paro. You're going to continue this." Vayetzavim el bnei Yisrael, and he commanded them to the children of Israel. So Rashi said, what was Hashem commanding about the children of Israel? Be patient. You know why he's telling them to be patient now? Because after seeing how the Jewish people reacted, Hashem said to Moshe and Aaron, be patient. Now is the time to begin your leadership of patience. Because, right now you need patience for them. You need patience for them.
Okay, still believe.
What?
Still believe in me. Even the reverse.
Now, wait. One more. Okay. Now, regarding the question that Moshe had about, getting worse. Why is it getting worse? So the Ber Yosef says that the answer to Moshe, why is it worse, was that message that the Jewish people, right, need to hear, that they have to separate from idol worship. What's the connection? Because as we said, why weren't the Jewish people? Why didn't they want to leave Egypt? Because they were addicted to the idol worship. So you know what you have to do to get a person off? You know what needed to be done to get them to start really thinking about giving up the idol worship? Make life here even worse. Make things even more miserable. Until now, they'll handle it. They felt they could handle it. Until now, they would tolerate the slavery because they didn't want to give up the idol worship. So what does Hashem do? It's called you make things harder. You make life super miserable to the point that they say to themselves, we can't handle this. That already can start getting them to consider, you know what? Really, maybe it's time to give up this idol worship because we can't continue like this. That plus the fact that now Hashem would show them the 10 plagues and all the miracles, that would pull them out from the idol worship. So the answer to Moshe's question is, why did it get worse? The answer is, it got worse because the Jewish people don't want to leave because they're addicted to their idol worship. And they know if they leave Egypt, they have to stop it. And therefore, at this point of time, they're ready to stick it out and to suffer in order not to give up the idol worship. So what does Hashem say? I'm going to make life even worse. I'm going to make it unbearable. And once they realize that staying in Egypt is unbearable, that will start the process of ridding themselves of the idol worship. They'll see the 10 plagues, and eventually what would they do? They would bring the Korban Pesach publicly in front of the Egyptians, basically showing the Egyptians that we reject your deity, we reject what you worship. And that would be the merit for them to leave Egypt. At the same time, it's worth mentioning that when the Jewish people were by the Red Sea, and The point came to save the Jewish people from the drown of the Egyptians. The Talmud tells us that the angel said to Hashem, why? Why the Egyptians? Why the Jews being saved and the Egyptians dying? These are idol worshippers and these are idol worshippers. They still didn't get rid of it. It's a struggle. Even if they went ahead and they started doing things to show that they're trying to rid themselves from it, apparently from this, according to that Gemara, I think it's a Gemara, Medrash Gemara, that the angels say, wait a minute, it's still in them. It's still there. They haven't got rid of it yet. And Hashem says, well, these were idol worshippers willingly. These were forced into idol worship. It was against their will. They're slaves. They couldn't basically really help themselves from it. That was Hashem's answer. But this struggle with the idol worship that they went through was something that we see was clearly a big problem. And according to the Ber Yosef, that is the theme of this part of the parasha. That's what this part of the parasha is revolving around. The Jewish people don't want to leave Egypt. They're ready to put up with Egypt to continue worshiping idols. And Hashem says to Moshe, you've got to deliver them a message again that if you want to get out of Egypt, you have to give up your idol worship. They weren't ready to do it. It was too hard. And therefore, Hashem says to Moshe, number one, be patient and know that the fact that things have gotten worse, the fact that I made things have gotten worse, is all part of the plan of getting them out of the idol worship so that they should be able to be redeemed. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you for listening.
This is for